To my understanding, there was a total of 29 bodies or 28 bodies. Were found.
I feel bad about killing the first person I killed in Vietnam. I see them just as vividly, just as clear.
One was under the garage, so that makes a total of 29.
Okay.
December 22nd, 1978 is when I was arrested.
You're gonna be dead in 2 days.
Yeah, I am.
Have you processed that?
I mean, as much as...
Did that arrest you, Carl?
Sentenced David Hosier to the death penalty. That after his defense made a last-ditch effort to get a new trial.
Hosier also added how much he missed the Gilpins. The next course of action for Hosier's legal team would be to appeal the ruling.
David Hosier showed no visible reaction when the judge read the jury's recommendation that he be sentenced to death.
I buried my daughter because of this man's deed. No parent should ever have to do that.
Number 1, John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy was born on March 17, 1942, the second child. Gacy was close to his mother and 2 sisters, but endured a difficult relationship with his father, an alcoholic who was physically hurtful to his family. One of Gacy's earliest memories was of his father beating him with a leather belt for accidentally disarranging components of a car engine he had assembled. His mother tried to shield her son from his father's axe, but to no avail. Despite this mistreatment, however, Gacy still loved his father, but felt he was never good enough in his father's eyes. By 1949, Gacy was able to come into his own and build a life for himself with the new addition to his life, Marilyn. After a 6-month courtship, Gacy and Myers married in September 1964. Marilyn's father subsequently purchased 3 Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants in Waterloo, Iowa. The happy couple moved into their new home, where he opened a club in his basement, where his employees could drink alcohol and play pool. These premises later became the site of many incidents of hurtful acts.
Way in the back of the house, in the rec room, on the telephone. When they finally walked around the side of the house, police station. Okay, well, I didn't have time because I was doing work for the county and stuff like that. I started doing painting, and then I started doing wallpapering and decorating. And inside of 3 years, 1974 became a corporation. And then I owned PDM Contractors Corporation. I owned Statement of the Police Department. And from that date forward, they had me under.
He had formed a strong foundation for himself and felt confident in acting on his latent tendencies, which he had kept hidden up till this point. Soon he was playing out his compulsions on young teenage boys, scamming them into acting on receiving his attention. Soon Gacy came into the notice of law enforcement agencies, and he was brought in for questioning. While charges were brought against him, Gacy employed criminal means to subdue the witnesses, but once again he was caught out in his dastardly designs. His psych evaluation marked him as a sociopath with psychotic tendencies with no hope for rehabilitation. Gacy was convicted and imprisoned for 10 years for the attack on teenager Voorhees. Gacy's wife petitioned for divorce and took the entire property as well as sole custody of their kids. He never saw his family ever again. Thus came the end to Gacy's story of survival and started his descent into crime. It was the beginning of his journey down a dark and evil path. His descent down the rabbit hole began in 1970, when he was released from prison after serving 18 months of his 10-year sentence. By 1971, he was once again behind bars facing charges of attacking a teenage boy yet again. With financial assistance from his mother, Gacy bought a ranch house near the village of Norwich Witch he used as his slaying field. For many months to come, Gacy used his residence to throw opulent parties, entertaining the rich and influential under his roof. He even made an attempt at normality by marrying once again, but it turned out it was only a ruse to throw any suspicion off his scent, and ended in a premature divorce. In their time together, his second wife had observed the comings and goings of young boys and come across their belongings quite frequently. In 1979, Gacy had a flourishing career as he worked for PDM in interior design, remodeling, installation, assembly, and landscaping. Through his membership in a local Moose Club, Gacy became aware of a Jolly Joker Clown Club in which he joined in late 1975, and created his own clown characters Pogo the Clown and Patches the Clown, devising his own makeup and costumes. That's where he birthed his alter egos, who accompanied him on a spree of crime, unlike the world had ever seen before. Gacy was unraveling fast, and the only thing which kept him from landing behind bars was that his victims were men. He had no control over his impulses, and all that mattered was that he got the satisfaction of acting on his sick fantasies, no matter what. By the time his criminal career was brought to an end, he had snuffed out 33 souls.
And that same day, they held me there for 9 hours, and while holding me there for 9 hours, they surveillance. The only trouble is that the Mickey Mouse way they were doing it, they had 2 cars following me day and night. To my understanding, there was a total of 29 bodies, or 28 bodies, where 1 was under the garage. So that makes a total of 29.
Okay. Now, from the standpoint of the arrest, when you did that arrest, do you recall?
December 22nd, 1978 is when I was arrested.
February 6, 1980, charged with 33 slayings. His lawyers opted to have Gacy plead not guilty by reason of insanity to the charges against him. Presenting Gacy as a Jekyll and Hyde character, the defense produced several psychiatric experts who had examined Gacy. But the testimonies against him started piling up, and his accusers started pouring out of the woodwork. John Gacy's long criminal career was about to come to an end, and his criminal tendencies had provided him with the rope to use as a noose against his own neck. At his final hearing, the jury deliberated for a measly 1.5 hours before it passed a guilty verdict, convicting him of the crimes he was facing. At the time of his conviction for 33 slayings, it was the highest count which any person in U.S. history had ever been convicted of. Number 3, Billy Wayne Coble. A Vietnam vet and an electrician by profession, Billy Wayne Coble had married Karen Vischa in the summer of 1988. Both had been head over heels in love, and Billy had had great expectations from his third marriage. But his optimism took a dive, and he was soon having marital problems and separated from his wife, not long before the slayings.
Do you regret what you did that day? Do you understand and feel the horror?
I accepted I did the murders, yes. I accepted that I'm here for those.
Do you feel bad about what you did?
Well, I feel bad about
The murder of Bobby and his parents.
Yes, I feel bad that I feel bad about killing the first person I killed in Vietnam. I see them just as vividly, just as clear.
Coble had kidnapped Karen Vischa at knife point. He had attempted to convince her not to divorce him, but eventually had released her unharmed. Several weeks later, Coble was seen driving around the area where Karen Vischa and her parents had lived. Drunk on power, Coble had driven around the small town of Axtell in central Texas in search of his estranged wife Karen, who had threatened to divorce him. Whilst he couldn't find Karen, he did find her mother Zelda Walling Vischa, father Robert Joseph Vischa, and brother John Robert Vischa. Reports filed after his arrest detail how he shot them in their home. Coble later found Karen and kidnapped her at gunpoint after handcuffing her 3 children and their cousin to a bed.
Death. Who is not going to leave this world? Aren't we all?
Did you love your wife, Karen?
We all have emotions. And there's many different as I did the day that it happened. But I can never go back and change that.
Away with Karen in a car, but was pursued by the police, who arrested him when his car crashed. Despite sustaining knife wounds from where Coble had attacked her with a knife, Karen had survived. Whilst Coble was in hospital receiving treatment for car crash injuries, he is believed to have told various members of hospital staff that he had taken the lives of 3 people. Since his capture and arrest in 1990, Coble remained in prison and was put on the ending row in the same year. However, in 2007, the gallows sentence against him was overturned, and he was awarded a new trial. At the retrial, a year later in 2008, the jury again sentenced him to the gallows. Coble spent nearly 30 years on the infamous ending row of his run from fate after the August 1989 shootings. Finally meeting with his maker on February 28, he became the oldest inmate executed by Texas since the state resumed carrying out capital punishment in 1982. Number 2, Scott Dozier. Scott Dozier was born before his eyes as he decidedly took a dark path. By his mid-20s, he was making much of his income from the production and sale of methamphetamine, during the course of which he would alternate between Nevada and Arizona, the 2 states in which he was convicted for the slayings which proceeded. On April 18, 2002, Jeremiah Miller met Dozier at La Concha in a motel on the Las Vegas Strip. Dozier had promised to help Miller buy ephedrine, a key ingredient in the production of methamphetamine. Miller had brought $12,000 in cash for that purpose. Upon Miller's arrival at La Concha, Dozier took his life, dismembered him, and stuffed him into a suitcase and disposed it near an apartment complex in western Las Vegas. The suitcase was discovered by a worker in the following week.
You're gonna be dead in 2 days.
Yeah. I am.
Have you processed that?
I mean, as much as I'm thrashing, coughing. So actually, I was going to bring that up with my mother and say, listen, just so you know, I've talked to people. I don't get it at all.
Why do you think the country has turned to lethal injection as opposed to the other methods?
You know, you're murdering somebody, man. It's going to be brutal.
Dozier was arrested on June 25, 2002 in Phoenix, Arizona. During a police investigation, it was revealed that Dozier went on a spending spree after he had allegedly stolen Miller's $12,000, telling his friends that he'd won the cash at a casino. Subsequently, he was also connected to the July 27, 2001 slaying of Jason Griffin Green, whose decomposed remains were found in the desert north of Phoenix. Dozier allegedly shot Green at a trailer in Carefree, Arizona, because Green threatened to expose Dozier's methamphetamine operation.
For that to happen?
I do.
And you're cool with that?
I don't care. I'm not going to get up off that fucking table.
How do you feel about the state using fentanyl to kill you?
I think it's awesome.
The death penalty?
No, I don't, though, actually. However, I think that about it because I think if there's a wrong that needs killing, you know, I mean, if that's the answer to it, somebody killed somebody I loved, and I was sure they did it. I mean, like, someone raped your sister, the only thing you do is bail that person out of jail.
Dozier received a 22-year sentence in 2005 for Green's demise. After being extradited to Nevada, he stood trial for Miller's slaying. He was convicted in September 2007 and received a penalty sentence on October 3, 2007, which was upheld by the Nevada Supreme Court on January 23, 2012. His execution was delayed by several years due to litigation by pharmaceutical companies against the use of their drugs and the execution of penalty sentences. He remains to be one of the few Roe inmates who had requested the state authorities in his own writing to act on their execution orders. Dozier had been on self-hurt watch for several months. According to his lawyers, his mental state had deteriorated due to deprivation of personal belongings and outside contact. On January 5, 2019, Dozier was found lifeless in his penalty row cell by prison officials, having hanged himself from a bedsheet attached to an air vent in the cell. He was pronounced lifeless at 16:35. Dozier was 48 years old at the time of his passing.
Background: the case of David Hosier, convicted of the 2009 slayings of Angela and Rodney Gilpin in Missouri, is a complex legal saga that has drawn significant attention. Hosier's conviction and subsequent demise sentence have raised numerous legal and ethical questions, from the circumstances surrounding the crime to the adequacy of his legal representation and the impact of his health on his culpability. This comprehensive analysis will delve into the background of the case, the trial proceedings, the post-conviction relief efforts, and the broader implications of the legal and moral issues at play. David Hosier's involvement in the case stems from his affair with Angela Gilpin, who was married to Rodney Gilpin. Despite the affair ending and Angela reconciling with her husband, Hosier perpetrated a violent act by breaking into their apartment and fatally shooting both Angela and Rodney.
Sentenced David Hosier to the death penalty. That after his defense made a last-ditch effort to get a new trial.
15 years each for the charges of burglary in the first degree and armed criminal action, and 7 for unlawful possession of firearm.
That Mr. Hosier ever possessed this gun.
Today, Cole County Judge Pat Joyce sided with the jury and gave Hosier the death penalty.
Despite an evidentiary hearing and legal arguments, the motion court denied Hosier relief. The Missouri Supreme Court subsequently affirmed his convictions and sentence, underscoring the deference to the motion court's findings and the thoroughness of the legal process. The case of David Hosier raises several legal and ethical questions that have broader implications beyond his individual circumstances. Firstly, it underscores the challenges inherent in capital punishment cases, including issues of legal representation, mental health assessments, and the imposition of the demise penalty itself. The adequacy of Hosier's legal defense and the impact of his alleged health issues on his culpability raise concerns about the fairness and integrity of the criminal justice system. Moreover, the use of aggravating and mitigating factors in sentencing decisions highlights the complexities of balancing justice and mercy in cases involving heinous crimes. The consideration of Hosier's prior criminal history and the circumstances of the slayings underscores the gravity of the offenses, but also invites scrutiny of the appropriateness of the demise penalty as a form of punishment. Additionally, the public attention and moral debate surrounding Hosier's case reflect broader societal attitudes towards crime, punishment, and the sanctity of human life. David Hosier case. The case of David Hosier, convicted of first-degree slaying and armed criminal action in the 2009 slaying of Angela Gilpin in Jefferson City, Missouri, stands as a grim testament to the complexities of the criminal justice system, the gravity of violent crimes, and the ongoing debate over the demise penalty. This case has garnered significant attention due to its high-profile nature, the brutality of the crimes committed, and the legal proceedings that followed. Angela Gilpin, a married woman with whom Hosier has been having an affair with, was brutally slayed alongside her husband, Rodney Gilpin, in their apartment in September 2009. The prosecution argued that Hosier, driven by jealousy and anger over the end of the affair and Angela's reconciliation with her husband, broke into Gilpin's apartment and fatally shot both of them.
David Hosier showed no visible reaction when the judge read the jury's recommendation that he be sentenced to death.
I buried my daughter because of this man's deed. No parent should ever have to do that.
Judge Joyce also overturned the defense's request for a new trial, leading to some interesting proceedings.
The heinous nature of the crime shocked the community and sparked a lengthy legal battle that ultimately led to Hosier's conviction and demise sentence. Throughout the trial and subsequent appeals, Hosier's defense team raised several arguments challenging the validity of the conviction and the imposition of the demise penalty. One key aspect of the defense's strategy was to question the effectiveness of Hosier's trial counsel, alleging that they failed to adequately represent him and present crucial evidence that could have influenced the outcome of the case. In particular, Hosier's public defender, Amy Bartholow, argued that his trial counsel should have called a psychiatrist to testify about Hosier's medical history, including a stroke and brain damage he had suffered. Bartholow contended that this evidence was critical in establishing Hosier's mental state at the time of the crime and could have provided mitigating factors that might have spared him from the demise penalty. She asserted that Hosier's brain showed signs of being lifeless in places, referencing a transient ischemic attack he experienced in 2007, as documented in medical records. However, the prosecution maintained that the evidence against Hosier was overwhelming, pointing to his motive, means, and opportunity to commit the slayings. They argued that Hosier's actions were premeditated and calculated, motivated by jealousy and a desire for revenge. Moreover, they emphasized the brutality of the crime, which involved the use of a submachine gun to slay both Angela and Rodney Gilpin. In April, the Missouri Supreme Court heard oral arguments in the case, weighing the defense's claims of ineffective assistance of counsel against the prosecution's assertion of Hosier's guilt. After careful consideration of the evidence and legal arguments presented,
an official sentence has to be handed down by the judge. Formal sentencing has not yet been scheduled.
Hosier also added how much he missed the Gilpins. The next course of action for Hosier's legal team would be to appeal the ruling.
Like I said, I'm sitting here accused of a murder. I'm found guilty of a murder.
The court unanimously upheld Hosier's slaying conviction and demise sentence. The court's decision reaffirmed the gravity of the charges against Hosier and underscored the seriousness of his crimes. It also highlighted the challenges and complexities of the legal system in cases involving capital punishment. While Hosier's defense team raised legitimate concerns about the adequacy of his representation and the impact of his medical condition on his mental state, the court ultimately determined that the evidence against him was sufficient to warrant the demise penalty. The case of David Hosier serves as a sobering reminder of the human cost of violent crime and the profound impact it has on victims, their families, and communities. It also prompts broader questions about the effectiveness and fairness of the criminal justice system, particularly in cases involving capital punishment. As society grapples with these complex issues, the legacy of Hosier's case will continue to inform ongoing debates about justice, accountability, and the rights of both victims and defendants. Missouri Supreme Court decision. In the case of David Hosier, the Missouri Supreme Court's recent decision to uphold his slaying conviction and demise sentence sheds light on a complex legal saga that spans over a decade. Hosier, now 69 years old, was convicted of first-degree slaying and armed criminal action for the slayings of Angela and Rodney Gilpin in September 2009. The court's decision, reached by a unanimous 7-0 vote, comes after years of legal proceedings and appeals. The case was argued before the Supreme Court in April, with Missouri Assistant Attorney General Craig Barnes emphasizing the experience of Hosier's trial counsel. Barnes asserted that Hosier had been represented by highly experienced legal counsel with over 150 trials worth of experience. One of the central arguments in the case revolved around Hosier's health, particularly whether he had suffered a stroke. Hosier's public defender, Amy Bartholow, argued during oral arguments that his trial counsel should have called a psychiatrist to testify about a stroke and brain damage Hosier had allegedly suffered. However, Barnes questioned the relevance of the stroke, pointing out Hosier's history of violent behavior predating the alleged stroke. The Missouri Supreme Court's decision, written by Judge Paul Wilson, affirmed Hosier's convictions, meaning he remains under a demise sentence. The court's 31-page opinion delves into the legal intricacies of the case, addressing various arguments raised by both the defense and the prosecution. Hosier's case is marked by a series of tragic events that culminated in the demises of Angela and Rodney Gilpin. While suspected of Rodney Gilpin's slaying, Hosier was only convicted of Angela's slaying. The legal proceedings surrounding Hosier's case have been contentious and drawn out, reflecting the gravity of the crimes and the complexities of the criminal justice system. The Supreme Court's decision to uphold his convictions brings some closure to the case, but also raises questions about the effectiveness of legal representation and the handling of evidence. Despite the court's ruling, lingering questions remain about Hosier's motivations and the events leading up to the slayings, the tragic loss of life, and the devastating impact on the victim's family serves as a reminder of the profound consequences of violent crime. Looking ahead, the case may prompt further examination of the criminal justice system's handling of capital cases and the importance of ensuring fair trials and effective legal representation for all defendants. Overall, the Missouri Supreme Court's decision to uphold David Hosier's slaying conviction and demise sentence represents the culmination of a lengthy legal battle marked by complex legal arguments and emotional testimony. While the court's ruling provides some resolution, the case raises broader questions about the administration of justice and the need for continued efforts to address the root causes of violent crime. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.